Here's what Saint Germain says about in the I Am discourses. The moment doubt begins to enter, more doubt rushes in. The same with the I Am. If you put your attention upon it, it rushes forth more and more. Where the conscious attention is fixed, there the energy pours. Dear ones, says Saint Germain, do you not see, when you want something revealed or to be inspired in some way, do you not see, I am that? The moment you say I am, you set in motion this power that has inherent within it all these faculties. It has all substance and must take on whatever form the attention of the mind is fixed on. The I am, the name of God, is the fathomless mind of God. In reaching for understanding, the average student is but contracting the recurring memory of that which has been, instead of going into the heart of God and bringing forth that which never has been. Individuals and students many times do not and will not realize that there have been many civilizations of vast attainments which are entirely unknown to the outer world today. Atlantis and Lemuria, or the land of Mu, as credited by a few today, are but fragments of the great civilizations that have been. Like, we get this idea that it's all now in this world that we're in and it never existed before. To do unusual things, the students who wish to do this take the determined stand, I am the heart of God, and I now bring forth ideas and accomplishments which it has never been brought forth before. Consider only, I am that which I wish to bring forth. The I am presence is the heart of God. You are immediately in the great silence the moment you say I am. If you recognize that you are the I am, that whatever you declare is manifest in that moment. So, when I think about why it is that people aren't able to create the kind of miracles that this group is going to be able to create after we disperse, it's that we have to make our number one relationship, our number one priority, the number one thing in my life. I was talking about this yesterday over and over again with people, with individual people, that my number one relationship in my life, at this point in my life, is my relationship to God, my relationship to my source. It's number one. It's above my relationship to my children. It's above my relationship to any of you, but people that I teach, to people, individuals in my life that I love. My number one relationship, and your number one relationship, needs to be this I am presence that is within you, that is within each and every one of us. And when you can do this, the reason people can't do it is because our identification is so strongly tied into what our senses have told us about our life. There is a place and a possibility that miraculous things can happen, but you have to, in order to banish the doubt, in order to heal this energy body that I'm speaking about here, in order to be, you have to be in such a position that you're not asking. You're not coming from a ordinary place asking someone extraordinary to do something for you. That's sort of what we've learned in our religious model, that God is outside of us, something like a cosmic bellboy, that if we just sort of ask it to do something for us and we behave and we pay a certain amount of money and we go to the right temples and we do the right things, that this external being will then provide us with favors, and that this God has the ability to heal, but it withholds it depending upon what mood it's in and so on. And that's a very different concept that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a concept of God that says that we are all pieces of God. Like T.S. Eliot said, we shall not cease from exploring. And at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time, to know it. You don't have to die to do this. You can know it here. You can know it now. You can say to yourself, as the I Am discourses say over and over and over again, the I Am is the divine work of God. And you are capable of saying I am. And you don't want to add anything after I am that isn't consistent or harmonious or in rapport with God. That is the all-creating knowing, the all-knowingness. We all know everything. There's a higher self within each and every one of us. There's a highest self which is omniscient and omnipotent, all-powerful, and everywhere at once. And when we're in spirit, we move away from a sense of feeling sorry for ourselves and instead look for what the lesson is. Steve and Anita had a daughter named Rachel. Rachel was brutally murdered and her body was left. And they wrote to Ram Dass, who was their teacher, and they said, how can we, after losing our daughter, how can we find spirit? How can we be inspired? How can we find God in events such as this? And there are many of you watching who have encountered these kinds of acts and have also encountered accidents and things that just don't seem to make sense. People just taken away from us at what are seemingly the wrong times. And this is what Ram Dass wrote to Steve and Anita. It's one of the most beautiful letters I've ever read. He said, Dear Steve and Anita, Rachel finished her work on earth and left the stage in a manner that leaves those of us left behind with a cry of agony in our hearts as the fragile thread of our faith is dealt with so violently. Is anyone strong enough to stay conscious through such teachings as you are receiving? Probably very few. And even they would only have a whisper of equanimity and peace amidst the screaming trumpets of their rage, grief, horror, and desolation. I can't assuage your pain with any words, nor should I. For your pain is Rachel's legacy to you. Not that she or I would inflict such pain by choice, but there it is, and it must burn its purifying way to completion. For something in you dies when you bear the unbearable, and it is only in that dark night of the soul that you are prepared to see as God sees, and to love as God loves. Now is the time to let your grief find expression, no false strength. Now is the time to sit quietly and speak to Rachel, and thank her for being with you these few years, and encourage her to go on with whatever her work is, knowing that you will grow in compassion and wisdom from this experience. In my heart, I know that you and she will meet again and again, and recognize the many ways in which you have known each other. And when you meet, you will know in a flash what now it is not given to you to know, why this had to be the way it was. Our rational minds can never understand what has happened, but our hearts, if we keep them open to God, will find their own intuitive way. Rachel came through you to do her work on earth, which includes her manner of death. Now, her soul is free, and the love that you can share with her is invulnerable to the winds of changing time and space. In that deep love, include me. In love, Ram Dass. I just don't think writing gets any better than that. And for those of you who can't figure it out, perhaps just listening to those words and being able to find inspiration, even in the most horrifying of times. When you're in spirit, you have a different kind of a knowing, one that doesn't require you to continue to suffer. To remember that our desires don't arrive on our schedule. They arrive when they're supposed to. I'd like to close out this program on inspiration with all of these inspiring participants, with all of the wonderful help of all of you who have inspired me so much with a quote from one of my great teachers, Ralph Waldo Emerson. We are very near to greatness. One step and we can be safe. Can't you take the one leap, just one leap? And from A Course in Miracles, I leave you with these beautiful words. There is a way of living in the world that is not here, although it seems to be. You do not change appearance, though you smile more frequently. Your forehead is serene. Your eyes are quiet. You walk this path as others walk. Nor do you seem to be distinct from them, although you are indeed. Thus can you serve them while you serve yourself. A new way of living, to be in spirit. Thank you for watching. God bless you. You are not an organism in an environment. You are an environed organism. One of the reasons the idea of being able to manifest is so foreign to most of us is because we have been brought up to believe that as individuals, we are separate from our environment. We think it is our role to dominate it. Armed with this kind of logic, we are diminished in our ability to sense our connection to the environment. This third principle of manifesting begins with the understanding that it is absolutely impossible to describe ourselves as separate from our environment. I am coining a new word for the purpose of articulating this principle. Consider yourself an environed organism. This word signifies that there is absolutely no difference between you and your environment. You are your environment, and even more significantly, for the purposes of this tape, your environment is you. Try thinking of the external world, your environment, as your extended body. That is, you are not separate from the external world. In this concept, it is impossible to describe yourself without including your surroundings. In fact, it is not even possible to see or hear yourself as a separate entity apart from your environment. For example, describe yourself walking, just you walking. There cannot be walking without also describing what it is you are walking upon. Without the floor or the ground, there would only be your legs moving back and forth, and of course that's not walking. Your experience of walking also includes the air you are breathing, the gravity that keeps you from floating off into space, the pebbles or carpet or sand or cement that you walk upon. And I invite you to shift your awareness away from yourself as an organism in the environment to yourself as an extension of your environment and always inseparable from it. This means that you have to think of yourself as an individual and as an environment simultaneously. Have you ever seen a person with a front but without a back? Have you ever seen a person with an outside but without an inside? Well, these rhetorical questions are meant to stimulate you to consider how you can be differentiated and undifferentiated at the same time, and why this is important in learning to manifest your life as you choose. The nature of the physical world is essentially that of waves. Each wave of energy that makes up a physical mass has a crest or a peak and a nadir or a valley. These tops and bottoms of the waves are always easy to identify as separate, yet they are always together. You can never ever get a bucket full of peaks and observe them independent of their corresponding valleys. This is the fundamental feature of nature. Your front always has a back, your inside always has an outside. And now you must extend this understanding outward as well. You are distinct, just like the tops of the waves that make up your natural physical self, but you are irrevocably connected to the outer world, just as that bottom of the wave always has a top. When you begin to see this simple truth, mystical experiences of manifesting also open up to you as a genuine possibility. You see, you're either pushing nature around, or you're seeing it as yourself, one or the other. When we think of ourselves as distinct from our environment, we take on a posture of exercising control over it. We destroy forests and swamps and mountains and rivers and wildlife or anything else that obstructs profit and convenience over something we call advancing civilization. We defend these activities without understanding that we are also destroying ourselves. As we have seen,
We cannot be described independent of our environment any more than our outside can be described without our inside. When we can respect that which appears to be external to us, we will build to live in harmony with, rather than in control over, our environment. In our personal lives, recognizing nature as ourselves opens up an entirely new world of manifestation. Your new faith will no longer permit you to see anything as separate. The separateness will always be there, just as the peak of the wave is separate from the trough. But they remain inseparable, even while separate. You will have fused the dichotomy that prevents you from putting this connective energy to work. You will begin to view yourself as an organic part of this world, rather than as a separate entity in this world. And then you'll see yourself as an organic part of this world. There's a popular belief that we come into this world. Thus, we are continuously embracing the idea that who we are and where we come from are two different worlds. The essence of the third spiritual principle for manifesting your destiny is that there is no separation, and rather than coming into this world as a construction project, you actually grow out of it. You are a result of what the universe is doing on a conscious level, just as a wave is what the ocean is doing, and a plum is what the plum tree is doing. The intelligence that is you, unseen as it may be, is you in every stage of your creation and life experience, and it is also the same in every other person, as well as in all things in our physical world. Notice that everyone breathes the same air, walks on the same ground, and thinks as an organism just like you. You are indeed connected to all of these beings. It is not an accident that someone living in a distant country with different outward physical characteristics and a separate language could die and donate their liver or kidney or cornea to you, and it would accommodate the life force flowing in you. A profoundly important Native American saying is, "No tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves." Imagine the result of such behavior by the tree. The tree and all of its parts would die from such an absurdity. Yet that is precisely what we do when we see ourselves as divided from all of the other people who are being peopled from the same divine intelligence. When you know that you grow out of this world just as an apple does from an apple tree, then you identify with the spiritual essence. It is in identification with this inner essence that you make your connection to everything else. And it is with this connection that you begin to attract your desires to your physical world. That power is in you, but it's not yours alone. The power and the magic of this world cannot be reserved for the exclusive use of anyone, including you. It is available at all times. However, it does not belong to anyone. What you are doing as an environed organism is making contact with an energy that is beyond the dualism of the earth plane, and yet is connected to it at the same time, separate but distinct. You are a holistic being with both non-dualistic energy and the energy of the physical plane at your disposal. The Bhagavad Gita, the holy book of the Hindus, summarizes the point of view as profoundly as I've ever heard. Listen to these words. He who sees that the Lord of all is ever the same in all that is, immortal in the field of mortality, he sees the truth.
In reading the aphorisms of Patanjali, he was talking, now you have to remember we're talking about before the Middle Ages, which were called the Dark Ages. And here was Patanjali writing about the ability to be able to do absolutely miraculous things. The ability to be able to be in more than one place at the same time. The ability to be able to be in the presence of another human being and raise your energy to such a level that you could literally, by your presence alone, just heal that person. The ability to be able to transcend things like diseases. The ability to be able to have the gift of fish and loaves. To just live at such a level of consciousness that anything you placed your attention on instantaneously, you had the capacity and the power to be able to make that realization for you. The book is called How to Know God. Now, it's not called How to Know About God. It's not called How to Believe in God. It's called How to Know God. And How to Know God means making conscious contact with God. It's the only way you can know anything. So here are the 5 aphorisms. The first is called the central act of ignorance is false identification. The central act of ignorance is called false identification. What does Patanjali mean by false identification? And what does he mean by ignorance? Ignorance is not to be assumed to mean that you are uninformed. It means that you are identifying yourself as a human being with your body and your possessions and this material world. And the central act of that ignorance is the identification falsely with this world of the changing. But beyond the world of the changing is the changeless world. And once you start to identify yourself there and know that this is who you are, know it, like you're listening right now and you're watching, and the energy that is coming into you is coming through your eyes and ears and senses. And it is only your eyes and your ears and your senses that take this energy and twist it into something called evil or problems. It comes into your eyes, these energies, and into your ears. If it could be examined just before it hits your eyes and just before it reaches your ears, and we could examine it very carefully, you would find that the scientists would say, no, there's no problems in that energy. There's no evil in that energy. Nope, it's just energy. It's just a frequency. It's vibrating at a certain speed. But as soon as it hits your senses and you begin to interpret it, problems begin to show up in your life. But the energy itself contains no problems. It's just energy. That's proper identification according to Patanjali. That's the first aphorism. The second aphorism sounds like this. The mind of the truly illumined, said Patanjali, is calm, because the peace of God within all things is known, even within the appearance of misery and disease. Even within the appearance of misery and disease. The mind of the truly illumined is always calm. And the mind of the truly illumined understands that the peace of God is in all things. You are in this world, but what? You are not of this world. That is not who you are. You are not of this world, even though you're in it. So you're filling out the forms, you send in your money to the IRS, and you stop at the red lights, and you obey the laws, and you follow the rules, that is, most of them, which seem to make sense, and the ones that don't, you're able to ignore, which you have to, otherwise we'll never have any growth. The third aphorism is quite simple, and it's one that's most troubling to many people in the West. Patanjali said, sin is non-existent. Sin is non-existent. There are only obstacles to one's ultimate union with God. You do not sin. When you behave toward another person in a harmful way, when you steal from another person, when you violate any of the commandments or whatever, you have not sinned. You have created an obstacle to your union with God. You see, the reason we don't want to put sin in there, according to Patanjali, is because it creates shame and guilt. Shame computes the absolute lowest in whether you're going to be strong or weak in your life. Shame is the lowest frequency emotion that is possible. It only computes at 25 on a scale of 1 to 1,000. The fourth aphorism that leads us into a spiritual solution to every problem sounds like this. And these last two are the ones that I absolutely resonate to and love the most. The person who is steadfast in his abstention from falsehood has the power to obtain for himself and others the fruits of good deeds without having to perform the deeds themselves. Steadfast in abstaining from means that you never waver and you never have thoughts of falsehood, that is, identifying yourself
as a material being rather than a spiritual being. And when you become steadfast in that, when you say to someone, God blesses you, they are blessed by your presence when you have that kind of consciousness. And you present yourself to someone and you are absolutely steadfast in abstention from falsehood. And in the presence of such a person, healing takes place. And blessing takes place. And the fifth aphorism, my favorite of all, says, when a person is steadfast in his abstention from harming others, then all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in his or her presence. So when you become steadfast in your abstention from ever having a thought of harm directing at other people, and that's how you walk through the world, butterflies will land on your shoulder. Birds will not be afraid of you. Little dogs, or even vicious dogs, will become domesticated by being in your presence. All living creatures, babies, will goo-goo and come to you. You know people like this, don't you? And what you'll do is set into motion these dormant forces, which will collaborate with you because you're in spirit rather than in form.
In the teachings of Buddha, there was a quote that I really loved. I didn't put it as a display quote, but it's really very powerful. And that quote from Buddha is, the only effort of any intelligent person in this world ought to be to know something which cannot be destroyed by death. The only effort of any intelligent person in this world ought to be to know something, not to believe in something, to know something which cannot be destroyed by death. And I wonder if you know something. Know means trust. If you trust in something without any doubt that cannot be destroyed by death, certainly it's not your body or any of your possessions, all of which will become dust. Everything on the planet, including you, to put it in Ken Wilber's terms, is tomorrow's food. It's a constant recycling in the physical plane. So what part of you cannot be destroyed by death? What part of you is real, if you will, as Lao Tzu put it? But I knew there was something in the New Testament that really had struck me. So the first is from John 10, verse 34. It says, "Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods." From Jesus Christ. Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods? Which is really what you have to understand and embrace and know if you're going to become a manifester. You have to know what you are being told here by a great spiritual teacher. You are gods. And the second one was John 14, verse 20, that says, on that day you will know. See how that word know is always there. You won't believe, you will know. On that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. So, what is being talked about here? What is being talked about is not something that is physical. This is not like my arm is in your arm, my spleen is in you. What we're talking about here is something that is beyond the physical, that is in you, and in the Father, and in me, and in everything. And if you get this, if you know this, then you begin to see yourself as connected to this divine intelligence that is everywhere, that is always flowing, that is inexhaustible, that is non-judgmental, that is available for you to plug into, just like electricity. And you can do anything you want with it, like electricity. It'll light up a hospital where everybody is reputed to be ill, and it'll light up a house of ill repute. You can do what you want with it. It is there. It is divine. And you are a piece of it. You are connected to it. And once you trust in this, and once you know this, you almost come to a different perspective in your life. Earlier in the first principle, I had talked about these archetypes that Carl Jung referred to. And in these archetypes, he said that we move from athletes to warriors to statesmen to spirit, and then when we are there, we can be all of these things. And one of the things that he also said is that if you don't get to this highest place, this highest archetype, then you will continue to come back and do it. Now, he's talking about reincarnation, and I'm not going to talk about reincarnation here. The way I see it is I think of God as like the ocean, for me. To understand this idea of learning to trust, God is like the ocean, and I am a glass. And I take this glass, and I dip it into the ocean. And I say, okay, what do I have here? And the answer is, I have a glass of God. Now, it's not as big. It's not as strong. It's not as all-knowing. It's not as all-powerful. But it is still God. And just like a wave on the ocean is what the ocean is doing, you are what God is doing. And until you know this, you will never have the trust I'm talking about. You are what God is doing. And if you take a drop of water out of that ocean and you separate it out and you put it over here, you will find that it is weak, that it will collapse, that it has no power, that it can't do anything, because it is separated from its source. And the same is true of us. When we separate ourselves from our source, from the divinity that is in all things, we take and make ourselves powerless, impotent, unable to do the divine things that we can do when we are united. Both as united with God, or with soul, or spirit, whatever you want to call it, united with each other. You see, it's that separation. It's always that separation. So it's almost like learning to trust in yourself involves trusting in the fact that you have a divinity. And this divinity is evident on the basis of the idea that God is everywhere. And if this intelligence is everywhere, you have to trust that it's in you. And there's no mistakes here. And while you may not always honor everything that you do and that others do, you can see that your essence, your basic essence of what it is that created you in the first place, is that divine organizing intelligence that can never die. You've got to know that. You've got to trust in that.